The Todd Shapiro Show.
Time to hit the button!
On Canada Talks, SiriusXM 167.
And the other thing we love to do is catch up with our friends in the cannabis industry, especially friends who love to do education and always remind you never to get high and drive. And, you know, we hear about them all the time, and we're looking forward to chatting right now with Darren Gill from Namaste Technologies, namastetechnologies.com. Hi, Darren.
Hey, how's it going?
Dude, you know what? I'm sitting in Muskoka right now. It's a beautiful day. I'm learning a lot about, different industries from pioneers and CEOs. And I love laughing. I love learning. And most importantly, I love God's country, which to me is Muskoka. So I have no complaints. And you?
I am out walking down the street in sunny Vancouver. So life is good.
Very happy to hear that. How are things over at Namaste Technologies on the business side?
Things are going really well. We had a press release that got put out this morning where, we've taken some class action issues that we had and put those behind us. So we're now able to get refocused on the business in terms of scalability and growth and looking at what our next moves are going to be. So things are definitely looking up this week a lot more.
Was that sort of a one of these, a difficult press release, but also a very just reassuring now, moving forward, wonderful, progressive press release as well?
I think, honestly, I view it as a bit of the latter, right? As, companies go through situations all the time, some good, not, some bad. But I think this press release in particular shows that we've really put any issues we've had behind us, and now we're able to get back to focusing on the business and, helping medical patients across the country.
Very good to hear. Namaste Technologies, namastetechnologies.com. And so what's next? What's moving forward? What do we got?
Well, we've got a lot of interesting opportunities we've been actively pursuing and working on. We'll hopefully have, some of these start to see the light, public light in the coming weeks and months as things firm up. But there's a previously announced acquisition in the UK that we're trying to actively close. There's a few other interesting opportunities, so we'll look to keep the public informed through the appropriate channels.
More on a business level and a generalized business level, Darren, clearly intentions are good to close deals and to make wonderful deals, not only for the company and growth and revenue growth, and also for shareholder value. How difficult sometimes is it where you get real close to a deal? Like, take us through a little bit about, just the process where things look pretty good, but there's hiccups and there's, a little bit of back and forth and stuff like there really is a lot of patience in business, I think, that maybe the average person doesn't understand. Is that fair to say?
The mentor of mine taught me a few years ago that in God we trust, all others bring data. And that's something that has resonated with me really well through the years is I think as you get to meet people and know people and you get close to a deal, you get personally invested in it. And one of the things that I've found is if you actually step back, you retain the right advisors and you listen to them, and you focus on a data perspective. Very rarely will you stray wrong.
Yeah, exactly. And the other one I've heard is patience is a virtue. Like, you really do need patience in life, don't you?
No, absolutely. I think it's making sure that things are being thought through. It's when you're being challenged, it doesn't matter how many times you've answered it. You go back because every person's coming at it from their own angle. And, as a management group within Namaste, I think we do a great job of that, where, we're not shy of challenging each other to make sure that the decisions we're making are actually the right decisions for the business.
Are the popo coming after you there, Darren? What's going? Everything all right?
Well, I do work in cannabis, so you never know.
Hey, on a serious note, this might be a great question to ask you. Do you ever, we heard, and we haven't heard about these in months and stuff, but traveling to the States and stuff, and, you being a high executive over at, one of the biggest cannabis companies in Canada. Do you ever have fears about traveling over the border?
I'll be honest, I don't think, it's never really crossed my mind. I haven't had an issue with it. Knock on wood, I've been quite fortunate from that perspective. But I think, a lot of it just comes down to being smart about your approach and how you're addressing things when you're going through customs. if you're going to blatantly offer up that you work for a cannabis company and you're going to a cannabis conference or something, probably not going to work out well for you. But, as long as you're smart about it, I notice you don't have an issue.
Speaking of the States, have you heard sort of any more news on will we ever get to a point of legalization in that country? And is there any sort of progress or updates?
I think there's a lot of folks that are anticipating and banking on it. There was a significant transaction announced earlier this week, actually, in the retail cannabis space by Couche-Tard, who's made an investment in Fire and Flower. And that's for a global expansion of cannabis retail. And, for a company the size and global reach of a company like Couche-Tard to come into the space and make that investment, I think still continues to signal that this is a global shift that we're seeing. And, it's a matter of time before we start to see, every country, including the U.S., jump on board.
Again, and one of the things I keep saying, and sort of people laugh at me, but I think Donald Trump's going to surprise people and start to talk about it as a campaign platform for 2020. Do you feel like that is something that one of the presidential candidates might offer up?
I definitely think so. I mean, it's mainstream in so many states now. From a medical perspective, all through the U.S., you hear about, folks that it's helping, lives that it's changing. We've already seen CBD start to get deregulated through the Farm Bill. So, at this point, it's almost a no-brainer. Someone needs to come join the masses.
Without a doubt. And they must be looking closely to Canada. Have you had ever, U.S. execs reach out to you over at Namaste Technologies to kind of pick your brain on how the industry works, on how selling works, on how the tech side of it works, on how, getting obviously customer base works and creating revenues? Do you ever get anyone sort of reaching out to you from that side?
I think it's very interesting. For when we think of the global cannabis industry and its reach, just how small it actually is. Everybody winds up knowing everybody through the events, the shows you're attending, and there's a lot of cross communication. So absolutely, and I would say I reach out the other way as well. There's a lot of things the U.S. is doing today that we're not able to do here, but it's always great to learn how folks are overcoming their own obstacles.
Without a doubt, what would some of those obstacles be?
Just in terms of product packaging, marketing, branding, things like that, where, I'd say the U.S. is a lot more liberal and we're a lot more restricted, even down to things like dosage. In the U.S., you're able to get what I would call more traditional dosage in edibles and concentrates, where when you look at the regulatory framework that we're being handed, in October, although it's a great stride forward, I think, you and I have discussed this in the past of, somebody who's getting 100 milligram gummy today for medical purposes in cannabis would now need to eat 10 pieces of it to get the same amount of medication. So those types of things will need to evolve over time.
We heard yesterday from one of the executives at another sponsor of ours called 360 Secure. We do it from the 360 Secure studios. They offer security, and they do a lot of security for cannabis transactions, quite frankly, or when you're moving cannabis from point A to point B. And Craig Bromell was on the show with us, former Toronto. He was the president of the Toronto Police Association. And he was actually quite vocal about, not necessarily disdain, but sort of a lack of focus on still the black market that exists and how the black market is still very prevalent and how really at the end of the day, there's just not enough cannabis companies in Canada that have outlets to sell them, B, can, talk about, a little bit more freedom on how to sell them. And quite frankly, there's not enough, there's too many consumers for the amount of stores available, including OCS and privatized stores across this great nation, that allows the black market to exist. And, in your opinion, Darren, do you sometimes think maybe the government has dropped the ball on maybe moving too slowly?
Honestly, I think huge. And part of this becomes the black market was here and prevalent for years before we came up with a framework on how to legalize cannabis. And one of the things, and again, this is my personal opinion, I think we almost turned a blind eye and tried to fit cannabis into regulatory frameworks we understood, things like tobacco and liquor, and things that, I think the politicians understood, where had we just gone and looked to what was going on, how the space was working, we could have come up with a regulatory framework to suit that would have, allowed companies to do similar types of things in a regulated and controlled manner, and step up the enforcement and wipe the black market out. But the fact that you look at, we legalized flour and oil first, and majority of the folks within the black market, even through the research and data that we've gathered, are looking at things like topicals and concentrates and edibles, and now that we're legalizing those again, rather than look to see what's available and how we can fit a regulatory framework around that, we've gone and reinvented the wheel and come up with things like individual packaging for 10 milligram dosage pieces of edibles, and the way we're limiting cartridges and vapables and things like that. So it's going to be an iterative process, and I think as the new wave of products come and people get to that feedback loop, we will get where we need to be. But I think even what we've done today is a step in the right direction, but definitely off the mark from where the black market is providing product today.
Darren Gill from Namaste Technologies. The other thing with the black market that I learned a lot about yesterday was still really, at the end of the day, it's organized crime involved in it and stuff. Is that something that must frustrate very hardworking executives, CEOs, leaders of industry within the cannabis space, such as yourself, Darren, that going like, why am I competing really at the end of the day with criminals?
I mean, I think it always does, and you look at, in our situation being an e-commerce platform, where we're locked to being able to provide medical cannabis to patients, but from a recreational perspective, each provincial territory, with the exception of two really being Saskatchewan and Manitoba, have created a regime where the only e-commerce activity allowed is through provincial government sites. And at the end of the day, again, this is another channel to market where companies that understand UX, UI, that focus on digital marketing are not able to even market to a recreational audience. So I think over time, again, you'll see the conversation come up of really what is the best approach to distribution, how much of this should you be privatizing, where should private sector have access, and those are conversations that I think will continue to come to the forefront.
Well, awesome, man. And I love having these conversations with you that help make this stuff come to the forefront. Darren Gill from Namaste Technologies, namastetechnologies.com. Always great to get company updates and cannabis updates with what's going on here in Canada, what's not going on with here in Canada at times, and really what's eventually to come in the United States. Darren, I always appreciate your time, man. Enjoy the sunny streets of Vancouver, and I can't wait to catch up with you next week or the week after.
Beautiful. Take care, Todd.
Cheers,
Bye-bye.
my man. Namaste Technologies.
This is the Todd Shapiro Show on Canada Talks, SiriusXM 167.